Good evening, everybody. Tensions between President Trump and the corrupt leadership of the FBI are exploding into open warfare. The FBI today releasing a rare public statement saying that the agency has, quote, grave concerns about the expected release of the classified memorandum from the House Intelligence Committee that exposes just how the Obama-era Department of Justice and FBI abused their surveillance powers. This is an extraordinary break with the president, who has said he is 100% behind releasing that memorandum. Our special guest tonight, the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, Congressman Mark Meadows. He says the American people deserve to see the memo. And tonight as well, scary moments for Republican lawmakers, some 200 of them. A chartered train carrying House and Senate Republicans to a retreat in West Virginia collided with a trash truck. The driver of that truck was killed, a passenger critically injured. None of the lawmakers were seriously injured, but President Trump says many were shaken.
They're doing pretty good. The train accident was a tough one, a tremendous jolt, and they're proceeding to their conference. We don't have a full understanding yet as to what happened, but it was a train hitting a truck going at a pretty good speed.
And tonight it is still unclear of why that truck was on the tracks. The president himself will be addressing lawmakers at that retreat tomorrow, by the way. It'll be something of a victory lap for the president, who delivered a powerful, impressive, compelling State of the Union address last night. We'll discuss what's next for this president who seems unstoppable. An A-list of political analysts. Ed Rollins, former deputy assistant to the president, Sebastian Gorka, and others among our guests. Our top story tonight, the countdown to the House Intelligence Memo release. President Trump now has 3 more days in which to decide whether to make the FISA abuse memorandum public. All indications are that he will do so as soon, perhaps, as tomorrow morning. But the expected release has caused a deep rift with the new director of the FBI, who has decided he's worried about omissions in the document. And we're just learning that the FBI has concerns despite viewing a White House version of that memorandum, the product of a review by the White House. Fox News chief intelligence correspondent Catherine Herridge is live now in Washington, has the latest for us. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Lou. Late today, the House Intelligence Committee released the 51-page transcript that shows Monday's vote to release the Republican-drafted memo was acrimonious, at times bitter, with allegations flying from Democrats. In this exchange, Congressman Mike Quigley presses Committee Chairman Devin Nunes over whether he coordinated with the White House. Quigley, did they have any idea you were doing this? Did they talk about doing this with you? Did you suggest it to them? Nunes, I would just answer, as far as I know, no. And I would also say that we are well aware that the minority has not wanted to conduct this investigation by the public opposition to the subpoenas we issued back in August that were clearly looking into the matters of FISA abuse. In a statement after the transcripts were public, the committee's ranking Democrat Adam Schiff highlighted the passage because a follow-up question about staff coordination was not addressed. Earlier today, the feud between the FBI, Justice Department, and Capitol Hill took a new turn, with the Bureau issuing a rare public statement claiming the 4-page memo is misleading and incomplete because facts are missing. It reads in part, the FBI was provided a limited opportunity to review this memo the day before the committee voted to release it. As expressed during our initial review, we have grave concerns about material omissions of fact that fundamentally impact the memo's accuracy. Nunes quickly disputed the claim and seized on how long it took the FBI and Justice Department, facing contempt of Congress, to comply. Having stonewalled Congress's demands for information for nearly a year, it's no surprise, he said, to see the FBI and DOJ issue spurious objections to allowing the American people to see information related to surveillance abuses at these agencies. And in what appears to be a reference to the Trump dossier funded by the Clinton campaign and DNC, Nunes continues. It's clear that top officials used unverified information in a court document to fuel a counterintelligence investigation during an American political campaign. FBI Director Christopher Wray and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein were at the White House earlier this week. And a source close to the matter says both men have voiced their concerns about the memo, with Rosenstein, quote, pushing back hard. The president seemed to make his feelings known after State of the Union.
Let's release the memo. Oh, yeah. Don't worry. 100%. Can you imagine that?
The committee is not saying whether they have any sense of when the memo will be released, but tonight we're getting a better sense of how long FBI director had on Sunday to review the memo. They said it was a limited review in their statement today, but what we understand tonight, Lou, from our contacts, is that he had 90 minutes along with Congressman Nunes and Congressman Gowdy to read that 4-page memo. Lou.
And, you know, as you have reported throughout, once the FBI director had taken a look at that memorandum, there was time aplenty to respond. He did not. As you reported, there was no revelation of any concern about a misstatement in that memorandum. And suddenly today we're talking about a director who's concerned about omissions. This is a strange rupture between the FBI, which after all is an executive agency, and the President of the United States.
Well, a bottom line for me, Lou, is that the FBI director and two of his senior associates at the Bureau, one from counterintelligence and the other from the legal department, have all had a chance to independently review the memo and to voice their concerns. Our contacts said they did not point to any inaccuracies. Today that turned into a statement about omissions, creating a document that was misleading. But it looks like the clock is going to run out and the memo is going to be released, and then both parties can perhaps fight anew over what it says.
Well, there seems to be more than an appetite for a fight anew and continuously. Catherine Herridge, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Outstanding reporting on an issue and events that are critically important to the nation. By the way, Devin Nunes, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, also putting forward this statement saying the memo contains all of the relevant facts on FISA abuse, referring to the 4-page House Intel Committee memorandum, saying, if we have this up on full screen, please, after fighting our demands for these documents for months, the FBI and the Department of Justice now seem to be going through a series of increasingly ridiculous, increasingly desperate excuses to avoid transparency. This is now an extraordinary moment at which we're looking at the House Oversight Committee, the Intelligence Committee, being treated disrespectfully by the agency over which it has oversight responsibility. This is stunning stuff this evening, and it is headed toward an outright collision. Our next guest here tonight has viewed what he says is the disturbing document that the American people deserve to see, and he wants that memorandum released straight away. Joining us from the Republican retreat in West Virginia, Congressman Mark Meadows, a member of several key committees, including Foreign Affairs, Oversight, and Government Reform. He's also chairman of the influential House Freedom Caucus. Congressman, great to have you with us. These latest developments here, this is getting uglier by the moment, when we thought we were on the way to transparency, the release of the memorandum straightforwardly.
Well, it is getting uglier, Lou, but I think the other part is it's time for transparency for the American people. I've been calling on it, as you know, along with Jim Jordan and a number of my colleagues. But Chairman Nunes has an obligation to inform Congress when there has been FISA abuses. And so all he's doing is following on his constitutional duty to let us know about that. Now, it doesn't surprise me that the FBI is pushing back. They have been stonewalling for a year. They've had to come under a subpoena and a threat of contempt to be able to produce the documents. And now all of a sudden they're saying they're concerned about omissions. Well, let's put all the documents out there. If they're concerned about this 4-page memo, which truly is revealing and the American people should be concerned about, let them judge for themselves. Let's go ahead and put all the documents out there. I don't think they want that either. And so when we're talking about this tonight, this is the thou protestest too much when the FBI comes here. They have grave concerns. I have grave concerns that the kinds of things that I've read about cannot continue, and now is a time for transparency, Lou.
I think nearly every American would agree with you. Certainly, I would say all Americans would, but we don't live in that time and age in which we're going to have unanimity of view. You know, Congressman, it strikes me that this is President Trump's director of the FBI now. We're talking about a man put in that job by this president, and he has the, I'm going to say it, the effrontery to go against his president, our president. There is in this government, as you well know, a head of state and a head of government, and in our system of government, he is the same fellow. I am stunned at what we are witnessing from the Justice Department, the ignorance of its actions and the ignorance of the words coming from the head of the FBI. This is stunning, stunning stuff.
Well, as Catherine was just reporting, they had the ability, some 90 minutes was actually much longer than it took me to read the memo twice, to go over and said, are there any factual inaccuracies in this memo? My understanding is that indeed they could not find any factual inaccuracies.
Right.
So now what they're wanting to do is tell the rest of the story so they can spin it their way. It is concerning. I can tell you that for us, we have encouraged our colleagues to support transparency in all regard. I went down and looked at the Democrat memo, and if they will fix some of the inaccuracies in that memo and sourcing problems, I believe we ought to release that as well. This is not a partisan document. This is a document that truly elevates concerns that all Americans should be concerned about.
And we are just receiving word from our chief correspondent at the White House, John Roberts, telling us that the new version of the memorandum, as it had been in some ways altered apparently by the White House review, 5 professional members of the FBI were at the White House to meet with the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and to go through that. Despite Kelly's efforts, John Roberts reports, to allay the concerns from the FBI went ahead and released that statement today, saying that there were omissions and that they oppose the memo's release. The statement, Roberts reports, has left the White House scratching their heads as to what the FBI and the Department of Justice are up to. I can make an interjection here and say to you, I can tell you what they're up to. They're trying to cover themselves and their actions up from the view of the American people.
Well, one could draw that conclusion, Lou, and when you see that what this actually is all about is not about divulging any types of sources. This is about transparency and what went on and shouldn't have gone on. I can tell you, I've been calling for a special prosecutor, a second special prosecutor to investigate this. If they're real concerned about anybody putting their hands on the scale or Lady Justice peeking from behind that blindfold, let us go ahead and get a special prosecutor and let them come up with the full transparency. But I can tell you, they haven't been forthcoming, Lou. We have been requesting documents in the Oversight and Government Reform Committee for many, many weeks, and we've gotten less than 2,000 documents of 1.2 million documents. So if they're concerned about omissions, they have part of that responsibility.
A substantial part of it when they are
official in this chamber is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too.
Much more on the president's plan to protect our borders and our sovereignty. Here next. Fox News has confirmed the president's personal attorneys now are questioning whether special counsel Robert Mueller has met the legal standard with which to press for an interview with the President of the United States. President Trump's attorneys making the case that there is no subject or line of inquiry that hasn't already been answered. More than 20 voluntary White House staff interviews, more than 20,000 pages of records have already been provided to the special counsel office. Joining us now to assess all of that, all of the developments with the House Intel memo release and more, is Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Greg, good to see you.
Good to see you, Lou.
Let's start with first the reasoning of the president's attorneys, which is basically to say to the special counsel, wait a minute, you should have answered all of the questions you might have for the president.
Right. It's a smart maneuver, legal maneuver. It has been used by prior presidents who have been the subject of questioning in various matters. And it's really meant to gain some leverage to try to convince the special counsel to limit the scope of the questioning. It's exactly what Bill Clinton did when he was questioned by Ken Starr, tried to limit the scope of it. So it's a smart move by the lawyers for Trump.
Well, that didn't work out so well.
Well, it did actually work out pretty well. They were able to limit the scope, but of course then the president lied, as President Bill Clinton and his wife were prone to do. And that led to the impeachment.
Well, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, you know, the attorneys must have said that damn president. There he goes, being himself again. As they narrowed it, he expanded it by lying. The effectiveness of this on the part of the Trump attorneys to keep the special counsel the hell away from the president.
Right. Look, when push comes to shove, special counsel can slap the president with a grand jury subpoena, and the president would have to appear before the grand jury. The best way to deal with it is exactly what Trump's lawyers are doing right now, try to negotiate, get a better deal, instead of prolonging it and challenging it in court on the basis, a legitimate basis, that Trump's lawyers are now alleging. There's a flaw in it, is that if it's obstruction of justice that requires a corrupt act, only the president knows the motives behind his actions, and thus Mueller would be able to go to a court and say, got to ask the question.
Got to ask the question, but the president, it seems to me, there's no potential for corroborating contradiction from any quarter if he is the only one who understands the motivation.
Unless he had discussions with others that might contradict him, that's always a problem. You know, you don't want to set a perjury trap.
No.
In an obstruction trap.
Well, further, I don't want to set a precedent by having, frankly, anything to do with the special counsel who is as conflicted, obviously, as this counsel is, who has a mandate that is so ambiguous as to be farcical and ethereal.
You are totally right.
I mean, why perpetuate this, if you will, fraud upon even the concept of special counsel?
If the scope is limited, and as long as the president sticks to what he has said earlier, I fired Comey, my constitutional right, for a legitimate reason that was laid out by Rod Rosenstein in his infamous memo citing all the violations of regulations by Comey.
Couldn't the President of the United States say to Robert Mueller, face to face, nose to nose, you know, your buddy, Rod Rosenstein, the one with whom you have so much association and therefore great conflict in just sitting here in front of me, is the guy who said, these are the reasons we should fire him?
Exactly what I predict the president will do. My only worry is that Rosenstein, who is both a prosecutor and a witness in the same case, might somehow try to contradict the president, which is why Rosenstein...
He's got to contradict his own memorandum first.
Yes, unless there were ancillary conversations that took place before the memo.
To the level of a memorandum that has been sent through the Department of Justice and the White House?
I would never trust Rod Rosenstein himself when the law demands it, tells me he's not a guy to be trusted. And so it's hard to predict what he'll say.
So to learn the full extent of corruption in the FBI leadership, or do you think this has just been a foreshadowing? Cast your vote. I just made up the last part of that. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram And on Wall Street, stocks closed higher. That's right. No suffering another day of losses. The Dow gaining 73 points, the S&P up a point. The NASDAQ up 9 points. Volume on the big board picking up to 4.2 billion shares. Stocks closing out the month of January with strong gains. The Dow and the S&P posting monthly gains of more than 5%. The NASDAQ gaining more than 7%. That's what we call a good month on Wall Street. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Up next here, Dems want to be known as the party of petulant scowling and just absolute fits. Ed Rollins joins me next as we take a look at the Dems' dwindling chances to do anything in the 2018 midterms. We'll tell you why here next. Stay with us. Well, joining us tonight is Ed Rollins. He's Great America PAC chairman, former White House political director for President Ronald Reagan, Fox Business contributor, much, much more. Good to see you. And let's start with what's going on at the White House. Trying apparently to appease the FBI, they recast the memorandum, make changes that they think will go over with the FBI and the FBI director that this president appointed. And out comes today's FBI response saying there are omissions. They oppose the release of the memorandum. I thought the President of the United States ran this government, that he was the head of government, the head of state, and people had to get in line.
Well, he is the President of the United States, and this
so why is he putting up with these fools?
He shouldn't. And the reality, if they change one word or they alter this document, they have basically damaged all the credibility they might have on this particular issue. The House, until this committee has oversight. In my lifetime and your lifetime, we've had FBIs under the first director, Hoover, which was corrupt. We had an FBI deputy director who basically fed all the stuff to Bob Woodward on
Mark
Felt. The reality is at the top of that agency from time to time, that you get some bad people. And I think the reality is most of them...
Well, it's clear. We've got some very bad people at DOJ and in the FBI.
And after 8 years of the Obama people there's no doubt. The key thing here is this president has turned everything else around that Obama did, and he needs to turn this around, and he needs to basically have full compliance with what he wants, and he wants to release this document as is, and he needs to do that very quickly.
Why, you know, I just don't even understand the nonsense. Why is the chief of staff the one working this with the FBI? Shouldn't that be the president's counsel? Shouldn't that? I mean, what the hell is going on?
It should be, and the reality is, I mean, with all respect to Kelly, who's a great general, he's not a lawyer, and the reality is there is a good lawyer in there. McMahon's a good lawyer, and basically look at it and put the stamp on it and put it out the door. That's what they have to do. They're not going to rewrite it. They shouldn't rewrite it. And if they do rewrite it, they damage the credibility that they have themselves. This is a document that was prepared by the committee, passed by a majority of the committee, passed by the Congress, and the president needs to release it, period.
Well, we're told that whatever this is, whatever shape this memorandum is in, it's going to come out as early as tomorrow morning, late tomorrow morning. I hope that is correct. Because now this is working against the president because of the clumsy nonsense in his White House. And that has got to stop. It's got to stop. He comes off the most brilliant State of the Union, and he's got to deal with idiots in his own White House.
Well, he needs to put a choke collar around the director of the FBI and everybody else has got... You get a commission when you're appointed by the president. He needs to put a choke collar around all of them and say, you work for me. Do you understand? This is what I want to do. He gave a great speech last night with real clear message, and he needs to make his people now follow through and go implement it.
Yeah, it's starting to appear as if there are several policies. There's the president's policy. There's that of his chief of staff, his Homeland Security Secretary. Who the hell knows what's going on here in the Department of Justice?
There's only one person who got votes, and he gets to make the decisions, and that's the president.
You would think that would be clear to all. It is obviously not. Ed, let's turn very quickly to that speech. Your thoughts about it, how it compares. Let's go back to your old boss and President Reagan. How does it compare to his?
I turned to my wife midway through it, and I said, this is a superb speech. I traveled with Reagan for years, heard just about every speech he ever made. I said, this is a Reagan-esque speech. Ronald Reagan could and would give this speech. It's the best speech Trump has ever given. It's one of the best speeches. There's clarity to this speech. Every single member of Congress, every senator can run on this message, as he did, and it was a reinforcement. And I think to a certain extent, as you see by the approval ratings that come in, 75%, 70% in 2 polls, and 95% of Republicans and independents approved the speech, thought it was a great speech.
Independents, over 70% approval. And that is a number that you need to remember come November in the midterm elections.
That's what decides.
That may change.
That's what decides the election.
Yeah, that really will. Ed Rollins, as always, thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're coming right back. A lot more straight ahead. Stay with us. Mounting pressure on FBI leadership ousted Deputy Director Andrew McCabe under scrutiny for his handling of the Hillary email scandal during the campaign, while FBI Director Christopher Wray seems content to try to stonewall the release of the memo. We take it all up with Chris Farrell of Judicial Watch. And this daredevil trio from England outrunning a Hong Kong security guard, leaping rooftops, laundry lines, and ladders will have the amazing video for you coming up next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Joining us now, Chris Farrell, Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. You have been busy. The FBI is busy. Just about everybody in Washington is either running towards something or from something, it seems, these days. Make sense of what is going on for us at the White House, where the Chief of Staff met with 5 professional staff from the FBI, thought they had worked out a deal where the President, the White House, had massaged that memorandum from the House Intel Committee, and then despite all of that, out comes the FBI opposing its release. What is going on here?
Let me boil it down real simple. The FBI is threatening the President of the United States.
How so?
Well, you know, they're going to come out. First of all, they've tried to put him in a corner and say, hey, look, we really don't want you revealing all the criminality that's going on in the organization. And so they're in a very reactive sort of posture. And so they broker a meeting with the Chief of Staff, who's the wrong person to meet with, first of all.
Yeah, I would think.
And then secondly, even after this supposed negotiation where the White House gave up its power, gave up its position of authority, they acquiesced to a meeting which never should have happened with 5 negotiators who I'm sure, you know, call themselves experts, you know, cautioning and warning and, oh, you know, General Kelly, this will be a grave problem. So they try to intimidate in order to cover up for their criminality. And then when they're all done, they still come out with a statement. When was the last time the FBI came out with a statement on anything, Lou?
Yeah, well, it's a great point because they haven't, I still haven't seen the Benghazi report. I still have, you know, we can go through the list. Yeah. The FBI has been a place where truth goes to die and where they're used primarily to cover up. It's under FBI investigation. We can't answer your questions. We'll never see you again. Thank you very much.
And so these political operators are threatening the President of the United States. They're betraying their oath to the Constitution. They are so defensive and so reactive, trying to cover up for the big FBI machine, which, as Ed Rollins pointed out before, frankly has a long history of all sorts of different flavors of corruption. Right. And when the American public learns about what's going on at the headquarters, let me tell you something. There's FBI agents or agencies, field offices all over the country where similar shenanigans are going on, and I'll point a finger directly at El Paso, Texas. There's all sorts of abuse, of surveillance, of mail cover, of telephone tap, of intercepts. This, unfortunately,
of U.S. citizens?
Correct. Things that I personally have reported to the Inspector General of the Justice Department. They know this stuff. This is the worst kept secret in the country. They're terrified, they're embarrassed, and they're frantic, and that's why you see them issuing this statement which attempts to undercut the actions of the Chief Executive of the United States.
It might be more persuasive if the FBI's leadership had any credibility right now with the American people or Congress. I just want to add this. If we've got this full screen from Devin Nunes, the chair of the House Intel Committee, talking about the FBI trying to avoid transparency. This is what Nunes said. Here we go. The memo, referring to the House Intelligence Committee memo, contains all the relevant facts on FISA abuse After fighting our demands for these documents for months, the FBI and Department of Justice now seem to be going through a series of increasingly ridiculous, increasingly desperate excuses to avoid transparency, referring to the 5 professionals who met with John Kelly, the Chief of Staff. This is getting to be so ignorant and disrespectful of lawful authority, that is, namely, the head of government, President Donald J. Trump, that I can't believe it's being tolerated. Where the hell is the Attorney General? Why are they letting this happen?
The Chief of Staff, when he got a call from the FBI or however the communication was affected, the response should have been, how dare you? What are you doing? What are you so afraid of that you're trying to swing the pendulum, the momentum the other way? The President of the United States has signature authority to release anything he wants to. And if he believes in this document and wants it out, why play these weird little patty cake games with 5 so-called experts? Well, the reason why is because they're afraid or they're a little concerned that the FBI is going to push back hard or further collaborate with people like Mueller to try to attack the legitimacy of this presidency. This is another grave threat, not just on Mr. Trump personally, but it's a threat on the Constitution. You can't let this stuff go on.
What should the president do and do now?
Release the original memo as drafted by Mr. Nunes and get it out tomorrow morning at about 7 o'clock. Let everybody pick it up and run with it.
Yeah. And there is also a loud message to his chief of staff. Get the hell out of the way. This is now a matter of the presidential authority of this government.
It's his prerogative.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Chris Farrell, as always, thanks. There's a lot more to cover, so we're just going to have to talk more in the days ahead. I hope you'll join us. Thank you so much. Chris Farrell, Judicial Watch. Please roll the video. This is a trio of athletes taking their passion and enthusiasm for parkour or free running. Wow. You know, I used to do this all the time. I couldn't even imagine with a ladder doing this. Rooftops in Hong Kong, their playground. Watch as they turn these rooftops into just an extraordinary obstacle course and personal playground. They were also on the run from security, we're told. But we didn't find out about that until later. By then, the video had been made. We thought we'd just go ahead and use the video anyway. Up next, battle over our broken borders. Another DACA recipient. I know, dreamers, dreamers, dreamers. Well, these folks had a different dream. They were arrested trying to smuggle more illegal immigrants into the United States as President Trump demands Congress fully secure the border with a wall. We'll have a full report for you on it all from the border. Here next. Stay with us. President Trump has promised to build a wall on our southern border, but it is a work at best in progress and right now mostly in concept. Fox News national correspondent William LaJeunesse is on our southern border with our report tonight.
That means building a great wall on the southern border.
But on Tuesday night, the president offered no specifics on the cost or length of that wall.
Keeping cartels out, keeping narcotics out, keeping terrorists out, keeping gangbangers and MS-13 and that type out, that was a good thing.
The Border Patrol union is standing by the president.
In the real world, there's a lot of grays, and that means compromise. And a real compromise usually is something where nobody's happy. And that might be where we have to go on immigration reform and things like that.
For decades, open borders have allowed drugs and gangs to pour into our most vulnerable communities.
Using the term open borders is controversial, considering President Bush doubled the size of the Border Patrol and President Obama deported 2 million immigrants. Yet a Homeland Security report estimates up to half of those who try to enter illegally ultimately succeed.
More ICE agents and more Border Patrol. For me, it means my community not being secure.
This video taken last week captures a dreamer helping smuggle a load of immigrants who arrived by boat in San Diego. Agents later arrested him and 7 others. The president's plan recognizes the number of Mexicans apprehended is now outnumbered by those from Central America, while a third of those caught are children. released pending a hearing for which many never show.
It finally ends the horrible and dangerous practice of catch and release.
Two issues the president did not address: visa overstays. That's an estimated 40% of those who are here illegally, and E-Verify. That is the program that employers use to verify a worker's immigration status before hiring. Without it, critics say, the U.S. still encourages illegal immigration. Lou?
William, thanks so much, and you're exactly right. William Lajeunesse, without E-Verify, it's not a comprehensive program for border security at all. Up next, desperate Dems rush to the defense of the deep state while whining about the release of the House Intelligence Committee memo that will show just how corrupt the Department of Justice has become. Stay with us. In our online poll last night, we asked, do you agree with Speaker Ryan's claim that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is doing, as he put it, quote, a fine job? 95% of you say no, you disagree with Speaker Ryan. Joining us now, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, former strategist to the president, President Trump, now a Fox Business senior security strategist. And I want to just turn straight forwardly to you and say, what in the world is the chief of staff of the White House doing, vetting a memorandum from the House Intel Committee with 5 professionals from the FBI, and then letting it be known that they've tried to accommodate the agency that we now know to be corrupt at its uppermost reaches?
Let's be very clear here, Lou. This memorandum was written by Congress. It is not an executive branch memorandum. The only function that the White House has now is to say whether they object to its being declassified, not to change it, not to redact it, but to get it out there. And the idea...
not, if I may, Seb,
yes,
not to bow to the agency that is under oversight from the committee that wrote this. Devin Nunes, the chairman of that committee, in my opinion, Seb, has shown more guts, more fortitude, and more concern for national security and the right of the American public, along with Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, and a number of others, including Congressman Matt Gaetz. The list goes on. There are a number of them. But this has got to be taken, I think, soberly, somberly, and righteously to the American people.
Look, God willing, Lou, the president will be triumphant tomorrow. He will say, release it, unredacted. And then at that point, we will owe Devin Nunes a great debt of gratitude. But the idea that the agency that is under examination is now balking at the release of the truth, well, what do we expect? The seventh floor was rotten to the core under the Obama administration.
And yet we've got a chief of staff apparently willing to change the dadgum memorandum from the House Intel Committee to suit 5 professionals from the FBI suddenly sitting in the chief of staff office to negotiate it. As Chris Farrell said of Judicial Watch, the head of research and investigations, he said this is an attempt to threaten the president of the United States. How dare them?
Lou, we've got a few hours for the president to do the right thing. I know he watches certain shows on this channel, so let's send a very clear message. Mr. President, the American people need to see the whole memo. Please release the unredacted memo.
Unredacted and unchanged by the White House,
yes,
I think makes all the sense in the world. Let's turn very quickly with a minute left here. The president on immigration, extending a hand across the aisle. Your judgment on his discussion of border security and immigration. We got about a minute.
Look, it was classic Trump yesterday, incredibly powerful moments, especially when the parents of those 2 16-year-old girls who were murdered by MS-13 were recognized by the commander-in-chief. But again, there was one real issue yesterday, this amnesty. You don't get amnesty for breaking the law, even if you're a minor. I'm an immigrant to this country. I had to get in line. There's a very simple fix that's compassionate. You get to the back of the line, no matter what age you came here, and you get a work permit. That's it. Never citizenship. And that's all you're going to get. That's my suggestion.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka, as always, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Luke. God bless.
God bless you, and thank you for joining us tonight. Michelle Malkin, Byron York among our guests tomorrow. Please join us. Good night from New York.